Well, it gives me great joy to be here at East Bay Meditation Center, because I don't think there's any other Dharma center like East Bay Meditation Center in this country or in the West. It's East Bay Meditation Center is really quite unique in terms of just how it serves its community, from just having a complete generosity economy where, you know, even when you register, you don't even have to pay anything to register, which means anybody can come and attend a sit here without thinking, I can't come because I don't have enough money. And I'm really overjoyed to be here because Shahara Godfrey, who I co-teach with, I've been co-teaching with over the past couple of years, it's been her dream to bring 8-Step Recovery to East Bay Meditation Center. And because of ill health, that hasn't been able to happen, but the time is right, and it's just great that we've got Walt Opie here, who has agreed to work with Shahara to support launching this 8-Step Recovery meetings, Deep Refuge, Compassionate Dharma. And so we're going to be starting by launching on February the 24th, and the meetings are going to initially be once a month, the last Saturday of every month. But before I talk more about 8-Step Recovery, I want to talk about my new position as being the president of the Buddhist Recovery Network, and that sounds quite grand, really, doesn't it? You know? I mean, we have a great website, and the website is really great. It tells you where there are Buddhist recovery meetings all over the world. And we also now, we've just launched an academy, the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. So 1 o'clock once a month, the first Sunday of the month, there will be a teacher giving teachings online. It's completely free again, and it's just half an hour, a short sit, a talk, and questions. But part of my role and saying yes to becoming the president of the Buddhist Recovery Network, because I was asked over a year ago, and it wasn't something that I said yes to. And I also, when I talk of the Buddhist Recovery Network, I want to call in the name of Kevin Griffin and Noah Levine, who many of you will be familiar with, and who are from the West Coast, and with Noah with Refuge Recovery, and Kevin Griffin, in a way, I have so much gratitude to, because in a way he is the one who really brought the 12-step tradition and Buddhism together, you know, because we know in the rooms of 12 steps, it's very, we can't, and it's great, we can't talk about other modes of recovery practices, but I think Kevin, with his books Breath by Breath and A Burning Desire, really made it okay for people who were in a 12-step program to be able to explore the Buddhist path, the Buddhist teachings with that, with their recovery program. But also to say that, you know, I do really believe that, you know, Buddhist recovery can be a path on its own for recovery. I cleaned up in the rooms of meditation. I cleaned up in the rooms of Buddhism. I didn't clean up in the rooms of 12 steps. And I was, you know, a chronic bulimic anorectic, and also a cokehead and other recreational stuff that went along with that. And so, but also because Buddhist recovery is still fledgling, it's still new, that actually it's maybe in the Bay Area it's possible to go to a Buddhist recovery meeting every day, but in many places it's not possible. And I really do encourage people, you know, I won't force people, but I will say, you know, it is really important to go to a 12-step meeting. That is important. And, if you don't just think, oh, it's Buddhist recovery, and then you just drop your 12-step program. But there are some people who do not want to go to a 12-step meeting, and it's really important not to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do. They will come to their own realization in their own way. I know in England we have festivals, and we have an 8-step recovery tent at a festival, and for some people it's the first time they've gone to a Buddhist recovery meeting because they've been too scared to go to a 12-step meeting, and lo and behold that there are many people in that 8-step recovery meeting who are in 12-step meetings, and it gives them the permission then to actually go and explore 12-step meetings. But what I want to say, coming back to that point of being president of the Buddhist Recovery Network, part of my role is to promote Buddhist recovery in all its variants out there in the world and to the public. And also, I think that part of my role, being a black, being black, I hesitated saying woman because I don't normally call myself a woman. I think my gender is quite fluid, but being a black being and also queer identified, my sexuality isn't fluid, I'm still attached to my sexuality, that I really do want to make Buddhist recovery accessible to diverse communities, accessible to people of colour communities, to queer communities. And it's quite unique here because, I can go to a 12-step program, which is a queer meeting, and it will be full of queer people, but it's unique here in Oakland or in the Bay Area. There's not many places where I can go and queerness will be in that room, or people of colour will be in that room. And I think one of the reasons why I never cleaned up in the rooms of 12 steps was because it was just so terrifying many years ago to go and not to see myself reflected in that room. I just couldn't do it. I had enough, to deal with, let alone to deal with just being the only one or one of two. So I think Buddhist recovery really does have the potential, and I say it does have the potential because, in a way, let me say East Bay Meditation Center has the potential, because if we look at Buddhism in the West, we have what we might call ethnic Buddhists, Buddhists who were born Buddhists. And so, there are many Asian people who are born Buddhists and have their Buddhist temples, which is open for me to go. But in those temples, you will see many Asian people, and Buddhism is through that Asian lens. But, if we look at the West and we look at white Westerners who brought Buddhism to the West, people like Sharon Salzberg, people like my teacher Sangharakshita, we explore Buddhism through the Western lens and through the white Western lens, And so, of course, in many Dharma halls, whether it be IMS, whether it be Triratna, whether it be Shambhala, that the predominance of those sanghas are white. It is changing, and I know IMS, especially in this region, is doing a lot to try and change that and rectify it. But here I am sitting at East Bay Meditation Center, and it's one of the few places where we can come and we see the diversity in the room. So that really is my role, is to make Buddhist recovery accessible to diverse communities, and I can't do that on my own. So I'm looking at you here. I can't do that on my own. To make Buddhist recovery diverse, then there has to be people to help take Buddhist recovery out into the world. So I'm just so grateful for Walt and Shahara carrying the torch, and for giving space to Buddhist recovery, 8-step recovery here at East Bay Meditation Center. And for me, it makes my heart sing, because this 8-step recovery program was co-founded by a black woman. I called myself a black woman at that time, by me, as somebody who's queer, and a white, queer, cisgendered male. And so in a way, it's just so great here that I have Shahara who reflects that black self, that black identity, and for Walt, who reflects that male white identity. And for me, it's just great that the two of us, Paramabandhu, we came together to develop this Buddhist recovery program. And basically how it happened was that I was teaching the 4 reminders, just thinking maybe in 2012, teaching the 4 reminders. And often when I ask the group of people to reflect on something, I think that I need to reflect on that too. And so I said, let's reflect on that first reminder, the first reminder of this precious birth. And let's reflect over it for a week. And I went home and I started to reflect on this first reminder of this precious birth. And some of you might know the reminders as the 5 Remembrances. So I was thinking, well, I know that my birth is precious because the fact that we are here, so many eggs don't make it, And so the fact that all of us are here is precious. And the fact that those of us who've had addictions and we're still here, it's precious. We know that many people do not survive. They either die from their addiction through overdose or through taking their own lives. We know many people don't survive. And but that was just intellectual, and intellectually I understood it. And although I've known this teaching for a long while, it was for some reason I wanted to get beneath the intellectual, because actually when we're reflecting, you can't do reflection from an intellectual level. That's not reflecting, it's intellectualizing. And so I posited this question, well, if my birth is precious, why do I want to live? And the answers that I came up with were just so ego-based. It's like, I want to live because I've got something to, I want to live because I want to carry on writing, I have more books to write. It was just very ego-based. And then I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll flip the question around and just say, well, if my birth is precious, why don't I want to die? And that even became more ego-based, because I was holding on to my, this being, whatever this sack of skin is holding together. I wanted to hold on to certain identities, so I just abandoned it. I just thought, well, okay, I'll just leave it. And I went back the next week, and we spoke about that reflection of of the first reminder, our precious birth. But I obviously it stayed with me, and I don't know how much longer it was, but I know a month or so later, this voice came up and said, what you have to offer is your recovery. And I just went, whoa, not interested. Got no interest in that at all, because I had never identified as being an addict. I'd never identified as having addictions, because I didn't go through the 12-step model. I cleaned up in the rooms of meditation, and I did it silently, and so that was like, it was like I just didn't even want to look at that. But I trained in mime and physical theatre in one of my lives, and I always remember my teacher saying to me that, if a thought comes up, it's more like if you're writing something and you think, I can't say that. that's the place you need to go and look at. That's what you need to look at. And even if you choose not to put it out there in the public, look at it. So I knew that I had to turn towards that. And at some point later, it's so serendipitous, you can call it a coincidence or not, but my publisher rang me up and said, did I have another book? And I just knew that that next book was going to be around recovery. And I invited Dr. Paramabandhu Groves to write with me because he is in the same lineage as me, the Triratna lineage, but also because he's just retired, a psychiatrist for the National Health Service in the UK, specialising in addictions. And we had worked together on the mindfulness based relapse prevention. So that's how it came about, writing this book. And it's so interesting because, you know, I've written, this is the 8th book, so I've written 8 books, or edited, co-edited books. And normally, you know, you write a book, it comes out, and, you know, you have the big fanfare, you have the launch, and, you know, and a few months later, you're just moving on to the next thing. But I haven't been able to move on to the next thing. I mean, this book came out in 2014, and I'm just getting really itchy to write a new book, and it will be on addiction, looking at the wheel of life and addiction. So for me, it was really transformative because it was my coming out, you know, my coming out of having addictions, you know. Never came out being queer because it's just who I always was, so there was just no, you know, I was very fortunate in the UK with the scene, you know. I grew up in orphanages, so I didn't have to come out to parents or anything like that. So, but coming out, and also in the era of Facebook, so you're not just coming out about having addictions to your friends, you're coming out to having addictions to the whole world. But it really has been quite transformative. And what I want to say about the 8-step program, I think what's quite beautiful is that the book was published, but we've had no money to promote the 8-step recovery. There's been no big machinery behind it. So basically meetings happen because people want them, you know, of not being out there kind of promoting it. And we do have meetings in about 8 countries, you know, and, you know, meetings happen because people want them, you know. Maybe at some point we may, you know, promote it. I don't know. I mean, there's no money. You know, it's all, nobody's paid for the meetings. There's no teacher. They're peer led. So, you know, really learning from the 12-step model. You know, we've got a lot to learn from the 12-step model. One of the things about 8-step meetings, which we don't have, is there's no food. Okay, there's no food, just tea. Because I think also the other thing which was really difficult for me, you know, when I dipped my toe into a 12-step meeting, forget it, I was a sugar addict, you know. I still am a sugar addict. It's one of that I always say that I'm an alcoholic, but my alcohol is solid. You know, for some people's alcohol is fluid, my alcohol is solid. I cannot have sugar in my diet. If I have sugar in my diet, I'll have my head down the toilet. I'll be binging and I'll have my head down the toilet. It's one of the things that I abstain from. So you imagine sugar addict, imagine, you know, if your alcohol is liquid alcohol and you're going to meetings and there's bottles of alcohol sitting around there, what's that going to be like for you? Exactly. So you imagine somebody being a sugar addict and going to those meetings and seeing donuts and cakes and cookies. Absolutely just no way. I can go into that space now because I have a level of recovery, but I still couldn't be going to meetings day in and day out because there is a teaching in Buddhism which is called guarding the sense doors, you know. And so, you know, it's a bit like, you know, if I sit in a meeting going week in, week out, I'm going to be worn down at some point. I'm going to be worn down. So we don't have food at meetings. You know, obviously if people need to bring food, that's their personal food, because we know that sometimes people, you know, have different ways how they need to eat, but there isn't cakes and donuts and everything spread around. So that's one thing that we do vary in caps, different in the rooms. It was very interesting for me just coming out about 8-step recovery, and not so much about having addictions, but coming out in the Buddhist world and in my tradition, because there was a lot of hostility around Buddhist recovery, you know, and I did have letters saying, how dare you, you can't do that, you're sabotaging 12 steps. It was really, but I just knew, and let me finish that sentence, it was really not a difficult time, but quite an alarming time, quite a surprising time in terms of the hostility and resentment. And it was an opportunity to practice and to actually try and put myself in those people's shoes, and actually realizing that actually it's about attachment, because I have a lot of gratitude for the 12-step program. It saved my partner's life. My partner has been in the rooms for over 30 years, clean and sober for over 30 years. It saved her life, and it saved many people's lives that I know. And we know that once upon a time, there was only the 12-step program. That, or having electric signals sent to your brain, or the asylum. But now we're in the 21st century, and you know, over the past 10 years, we've seen smart recovery, which has got a lot of traction, and different variations of Buddhist recovery. And why did it take so long? Because if you look at the Buddhist teachings is a way out of suffering. The Buddhist teachings is a way out of the addictive mind. That's what the path is about. You know, that's what the path is about. And I really think that those of us who really take seriously Buddhist recovery, we have the opportunity not to spiritually bypass, because spiritual bypassing is a very common thing in the Buddhist world. And you know, we should only experience dhyanas, these positive mental states, and we should only have joy, and you know, as long as we're reciting the precepts and the refuges, we'll be okay. But we do have to turn towards ourself, as Dogen, one of the great Buddhist teachers, said, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. So when we study the self, that means we have to get to know our past, we have to get to know our identities that have kept us in prison. But then Dogen always says, to study the self, we have to let go of the self. And so at some point we do have to let go of these identities. But you can't let go if you don't know what it is that you're not letting go of. You know, and so those of us who step onto the path of recovery, whatever that looks like for you, is a real opportunity to let go of our stories. And you know, one of the things in the rooms of 12 steps which is so important is the validation of our stories. I mean, that's what we get when we go to a psychotherapist, the validation of our stories. What we get in Buddhist recovery is the validation, but then at some point we have to let go of the story. That's the important part of our recovery. And the hardest part of our recovery is to let go of those stories, those narratives that keep us in prison. I often say to people who are in a 12-step program that actually you can see your 11th step, as we heard it mentioned today, having a closer relationship, a closer connection to prayer, meditation and God, that actually you could see these 8 steps unpacking that spiritual step for you. And for those of you who are new to recovery, you could also see that these 8 steps is a path to liberation, and you may want to dip your toe into 12-step recovery too. So I think I'm going to end there, because I do want to be able to do a bit of practice. Maybe I do definitely want to do a short practice of the 4 basic needs of the heart, and it would be great to have some questions. So I'm going to end the talk here, and I just want to say just thank you for coming. You know, it's just inspiring, you know, as Candy said, wow, people have just turned up, you know, and it's just, the recovery community is part of my community, and it's just great to be able to integrate my recovery with my Buddhist path. They're inextricably linked, and I just want to again thank Shahara Godfrey and Walt Opie for launching 8-Step Recovery here in Oakland, adding to the canon of Buddhist recovery, because we have refuge recovery here, and adding to the canon of recovery because there are 12-step meetings everywhere we turn. So we are fortunate. Thank you.